It was pretty clear that Rome Ullia was headed for prison or a violent death on the streets. But then came a baby, a bus stop, and an ancient book.
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
I'm here with Rome Ullia, who has an incredible story in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. In fact, you got the front cover, Rome. You're a very photogenic looking guy, you know, so... No, good on you. Look, it is an incredible story. I actually heard it first when you spoke at a conference up in Toowoomba, I think it was, and the theme of the conference was looking at understanding Bible prophecy and trying to help everyday people to understand what that might mean. And you got up there and you told this incredibly powerful personal story about your life that certainly did include your encounter with the book of Daniel, but it was so much bigger than that. And I remember the sort of MC after you saying, well, that was a bit different. like maybe that they hadn't quite expected you to sort of come at the topic from that perspective. But so from telling your story that there at Toowoomba and other places where you've told it, what sort of response do you get?
You know, I get a lot of people coming up to me, talking to me about how they've been praying for their children, they've been praying for their loved ones, and some of them felt discouraged whether or not God was hearing their prayers or whether or not God was able to help them in their situation. But after hearing my story and how long my mother prayed, they were just so, they would come over and say, please pray for us. And, thank you for the encouragement, because, they felt like a year or 2 years was, nothing was happening, and they lost, that sort of hope that God was going to do something for them, hearing that my mother was praying for like almost 30 years for me.
Wow.
To give my life to God. My mother, she plays a huge part in my testimony. She's a woman of prayer. She prayed from as young as I could remember, around the age of 3 and 4. I can still remember her praying for us around that bed, even though she was told by my father that she wasn't allowed to practice her faith at home. And I would remember her praying for us. And, I'd go for a series of court cases and she was there praying for us. And even now she's still praying,
Yeah. But that, I have to admit, that's what really impressed me about her, because, sometimes we get this vision of church people who are, so heavenly minded that they're no earthly use. But
that's right.
But when you depict your mother coming right there into the courtroom, with you or your brother in trouble there, and her, praying, you can just see her silently praying there, praying for your souls, praying for the outcome and for God's will to be done. I thought, wow, this is a woman for whom prayer is a weapon of everyday warfare. And I was, I read the story of Joseph and I see the series of events that Joseph went through, and they were all like terrible events. I was thinking, at what point are you going to break and give up? Mm-hmm. And looking at my mother, she used to hold my hand at the age of like 5, 6, going to school, or we'd go into the nearby town and we'll walk past the courtrooms, and she'd say, son, I never want to see you here at these courtrooms. I pray that you would never be here. And, when I became a teenager, I was there almost religiously every year. Mm. And I thought, if that was me, I would have seen that as a sign, like, my prayers aren't working. Maybe I should have abandoned my faith. But that wasn't Mum. She went through a whole series of terrible events, with my father, with me and my brother. But nowhere in our story did we see her showing any signs of like giving up on her faith. But yes, sure, we did see her at moments where she would be in tears, where she would, like, when she would pray, it was like she was wrestling in her prayers, Mm-hmm.
And I still have those memories of her in my mind,
Wow. Certainly, like in the article that does appear in, the June edition of Signs of the Times, your mother's presence and your mother's prayers are this theme that is sort of between the lines, sort of undergirding the story. But what's more on the surface that I find really interesting is your relationship with your father, because you say in the article that he was a pretty sort of tough dude who had very high expectations for his kids and was not not particularly warm and cuddly man, and was very hard for you guys to feel that he was ever proud of you or that he ever really loved you. But the story that you tell is one of reconciliation between you and him, and it's, by the end of the story, you're incredibly close. Can you just give us a thumbnail sketch of what happened there?
Sure. You see, my father, I don't know whether it was the old school or how they were in the islands, but they never, ever expressed their feelings towards their sons. It was always hard love. And at home, whenever I do anything, he would never say that he was proud of me. And I always knew that I was in trouble when he would have me in front of him, and then he wants to have a talk with me. So the only time Dad wanted to talk with me is when I've done, when I've messed up. So I thought that was just the norm, and it wasn't until I went to school. We had athletics day at primary school, and I remember all the parents there with their children, and they were, just affirming them, saying to them,
cheering them on.
Once you come, we're proud of you, Then I thought, something wrong with them. That's just wrong. And then I started seeing more and more parents doing that with their children, and I realized, there's something wrong with me and my relationship with my father.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this relationship where I was just afraid of him.
Yeah.
I feared him.
It's interesting, Rome, that you ended up. Well, it's tragic, really, that you ended up with a life of gangs and crime and and this sort of stuff on the streets of Auckland there, and I wonder how many other young boys, young kids out there on the street with you were perhaps came from a similar background with either an absent father or a father who wasn't might as well have been absent for all the connection they had with him.
Absolutely. When I was when that edition came out, one of my friends who's still involved in the with gangs, he rings me up and says he actually saw the edition and he was reading it online.
Oh, no way.
And one of the things he said to me was, I read that story, Rome, and I just you're talking about our story. You're talking about my story. Mm-hmm. You're talking about you're a representative of all of us that went through that, and somehow you've broken free and started a new life, and it kind of gives us hope that there is also hope for us to get out of this one day, And he said to me, pray to your God for me, that there's a way out for some of us. So you're right. There's a lot of guys out there who have had broken homes, who've had broken relationships with their fathers and have not reconciled. But like my father, when he gave his life to God, his story is an amazing story. That he's on his way he's on his way home from work, and his car breaks down. He has two items in the car. That's a 20 kg potato sack, and a beer crate. Yeah. And he could only take one of those to the nearest bus stop. And as an indication of where he was in his life at the time, he took the beer crate.
Yeah.
Left the 20 kg potato sack in the car.
Yeah.
Goes to the nearest bus stop, and there at that bus stop, behind that bus stop in central Auckland, there's a hall there, a school hall at Ngā Tapuai College, where they had a evangelistic series, a Daniel Revelation prophecy seminar.
Oh,
and
okay.
Dad hearing that sermon, I could just see my dad in the beginning of that sermon cringing and just wanting his bus to come. But his bus comes 20 minutes into the sermon.
Because your dad was very anti-religion up to that point, wasn't he?
Oh, he was. He used to make a mockery of religion. He used to mock my mother's faith. He used to have a joke or two about the Gospels. He just had nothing good to say about religion or in Christianity. That while he was standing out there, I wasn't there, but I could just picture him just cringing as he's hearing the sermon. But 20 minutes into the sermon, he's heard something that he's never heard. He's listening to something he's never heard before. And as he's listening, his bus comes. He allows the bus to go. In fact, there were two buses that came, and he let both buses go. He would not leave until that sermon had concluded.
Wow, it's incredible, and that obviously is the beginning of an incredible change of heart for him, which led to an incredible reconciliation for you. Do you find that you parent? How many kids do you have now?
I have 5 children.
Whoa.
My wife and I, we have 5 kids.
No way. Okay.
Yeah, we have 5 children, 3 girls that own me and 2 boys.
Wow. So how do you find that your experience with your father and the change that you saw him make and the reconciliation that you and him were able to make, eventually after he, had this incredible, transformation in his life? How do you perhaps, father or parent differently because of what you've been through?
You see, I'm like so anti-violence right now. That's where I am with my life.
Yep.
Every time, my children mess up, you see, I'm the last one that discipline them. I should tell them off and stuff, but even telling them off, I've become somebody that just wants to move so far away from violence because of what happened to me growing up.
Sure.
But then, I'm at that place now with my children where communication is everything.
Yeah.
We talk about everything, the good times and the bad times. I affirm them. I tell them how much I love them. I even sing to my girls, They get sick of it to the point where they get embarrassed at school. They're, Dad, you've got to stop. But I can't help it, I just want them to know that I'm there for them and I love them. And I'm really conscious about that because I know that when I was growing up, it's one of those things that I went searching for in the world. I was searching for affirmation. I was searching to be loved. And I learned so much about what I should be, what I shouldn't do as a father growing up with my dad. And it was just amazing that when my dad had his transformation, the way he was the way he is with his grandchildren. Yeah, I'm like, this is a completely different person. Like, Dad, you were hard on me. Why are you not hard on the children? And Dad had completely changed his mind about affirming us as his children, his grandchildren, showing us love. And I guess it's that picture of Jesus, coming out of the water and hearing coming out of baptism and hearing his Father, affirm him. That picture of Jesus being affirmed by his Father and Jesus affirming his disciples, it really rubbed off on my dad and it's rubbed off on me. And we have this family now where, like me and my brother, the way we are towards our kids, it's just so much love in the house, and it's because of that,
Yeah, wow. I really want our listeners to, get a mental picture of this. When you say you sing to your daughters, and because I mean, here's a guy, who's a power lifter, big muscly dude, like tattoos, all down his arms, and he's a big softy there with his girls, singing songs. It's a beautiful image, Rome. It really is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, now just back to the gang thing, because often people tell these terrible stories. I was into gangs and drugs and in the gutter and now God's changed my life. And your story is one of those. But what I find interesting in that is that in that gang scene, you actually saw some positives there. You saw some incredible loyalty there in the gang scene that really has impressed you for the rest of your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Some of these boys that ended up joining gangs with me, I remember them as kids. I mean, we were all playing, out on the streets together as kids, living in these flats, 1-bedroom flats, and we had families like, 5, 6 families, all in these small little houses out in South Auckland and West Auckland. And when we grew up, we were so lost as to who we were. Where do we fit in? Who are we? We had an identity crisis because we're Samoans living in New Zealand. Yeah. And the Samoans, the islanders, they only migrated into the cities in New Zealand during the late 60s, early 70s, when the factories had all opened up. Yeah. And so during that time, we built this brotherhood. It was a brotherhood that we had this code to, no matter what, we would back each other up. We would be there for one another. And, it still kind of breaks my heart when I think about it now. Some of my close friends who are no longer here today. I've got a picture of me and my boys, only 2 of us alive in one of those pictures. And, we all chose, different paths. And even though some of them are still in the gang life and some of them made the wrong decisions and some of them lost their lives, to me, they'll forever be my brothers because we were loyal to each other. We were there for for one another. I was 13 years old when I rocked up to a gang party where guys were all gathered there, all wearing one color.
Yep.
And I turned up amongst them as a 13-year-old kid who lied to his parents and said that he was sleeping at his friend's house, but it was just an excuse to turn up to this gang gathering. And at 13 years old, I turned up to that gathering out in New Lynn Rada Village. I had a blue bandana on my head, and one of the guys walked out of there, snatched it off my head, and he was in his early 20s, this guy, and he just smashed me right in the nose.
Wow.
And threw the bandana back at me, and he said, "You got to bleed for your colors. You don't just rock up here wearing your colors. You bleed for it."
Yeah.
I've been stabbed, been in hospital, almost losing my life, and reflecting back to that moment when I first gave my life to gangs, I bled to get in. So I remember saying to myself in that hospital, almost losing my life, I said, this is the life I chose. We're going to bleed for this. We'll die for this. This is it.
Wow.
There's no way out. We're going to die for each other. There was a sense of excitement about that as well, because you felt like you were dying for something that was worthy.
And belonging and purpose.
Yeah. I mean, it was the first time I ever felt true love.
Yeah.
Amongst these guys who, we used to have a saying, it was like one call away. We just make that one call and we're all there. Cars will be, we'll all gather in that one place, and all the boys will be there just to make sure that one guy's safe. Or, if another gang, a rival gang was coming after one of us, he'll have to deal with all of us. And sometimes these gang warfares will go on for weeks, months, even years, and some of them don't stop until somebody dies.
Yep. You're like the title of your article, blood in, blood out, and sometimes that's the only way you leave the gang, and that's in a box, sadly.
Yeah, well, that's it. I still remember a guy who said to me, after he was patched up, he spent like 2 months as a patched up gang member of one of the notorious bikie gangs in New Zealand. After 2 months in there, he realized, this is not good for me and my family. He goes to hand his patch back in, and they said to him, "Well, what do you think this is? You think this is a boys' club?" Just come in here and hand in your patches. That was the sort of gang culture that was in New Zealand. It was, once you're in for good. Mm-hmm. And for me, as I look at my life and I look at some of the boys that I was with, and we were so close. It wasn't about gangs for me. It was more like a brotherhood. We were there ready to die for each other. Yeah. When my son was born, changed everything for me.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
My son. When his mother told me that she was pregnant, I wasn't ready to be a father. I had run away from home. My relationship with my father was broken. I knew I wasn't going to be a good father. So I told her that, we were going to get rid of the baby. We both agreed to it. We went to Green Lane Hospital in Auckland, and we made an appointment, and they told us that we needed to go through a series of counseling sessions before they could do that. Yep. And so we went through the counseling sessions. We signed the papers, we made the agreement, and we went in for the day. So I still remember that day like it was yesterday. I was outside, the office waiting, for her to turn up. And our appointment was at 10 o'clock in the morning. She didn't turn up. Yep. So I knew she wasn't going to come to it. So I went to a nearby payphone. I called her up and left a nasty message on the phone telling her, pretty much you're on your own. Yep. Yeah. It's about 9 months later, I get this phone call from someone from her family saying to me, Rome, I just want you to know that you had a son today, just so you know. And as much as I wanted to forget about it, and as much as I wanted to hold on to my stubbornness and blame her for going ahead with the pregnancy, I had this feeling of excitement and curiosity. And I just said to the boys, let's go and check this out, man. Let's go and I'm going to be in and out. Trust me, I'm going to be in and out. Now, the person that walked into that hospital was a person that was willing and ready to die for my boys. I had something to die for. Yep. I walked into that hospital and I saw my son for the first time, and I held him close to my chest. I could feel him breathing on my neck. I was like, my whole life changed. Everything changed for me. What was supposed to be an in and out moment ended up being a 3.5 hour moment. And so when I walked out of that hospital, for me, I was like, forget something to die for. I've got something to live for.
Yeah.
I've got something that I'm excited about. I can't wait to see him tomorrow. I can't wait to celebrate his first birthday. I just had all these things in my head that when I jumped in the car, the boys went to reverse and they just looked at me and they said, in and out. And, I looked at them and I said, I wanted to explain to them how I felt, but none of them would know how I felt because none of them were a father at the time.
Yeah.
When we went down Lincoln Road, just to give you an insight of what that effect had on me, the boys went to do a burnout down Lincoln Road, and I snapped and I said to the driver, "Hey, this road here is 60. You drive 50." And they all like freaked out in the car. They're like, "What are you talking about?" And the driver said, "Dude, you know what? Because I'm serious about it. I'll drop it down to 45 even." But for me, I said under my breath, and I said it to them like, "Dude, I want to be alive to see my son tomorrow."
Yeah.
And you could hit somebody who could be somebody's father, could be somebody's son. All of a sudden, I've fallen in love completely. What the epitome of what it means to be in love.
Yeah.
I was so in love that I was ready to sacrifice anything. I was ready to give up anything to have that life with him. It was always at the back of my head, but I never really acted it out until a series of court cases where I was done for so many different things that I realized, I'm either going to go to prison for life or I'm going to end up dead in the streets. So I made a decision, after I was done for, a crime that I did back in New Zealand. I was locked up, and when I got out, the very first thing after those series of court cases, held at remand, the only thing that was in my mind now was get out of gangs, get out of New Zealand, and start a new life somewhere. And when I heard that my brother was in Australia, to me it was perfect. But now it was like, can I get into the country? Can I get into Australia?
With your record, that would be really hard.
Well, yeah, it was, man. They held me up at customs, and they had to question me. What was my intentions? They started talking to me about people who I was affiliated with, and by the grace of God, man, after like few hours of being questioned, they gave me my passport and my backpack. That's all I had was just a bag over my shoulder, and I walked out of there and jumped on a train. Got off at Central and asked the booth, how can I get to Morisset? I'm looking for my brother's address, and he was living in Cooranbong at the time. Yep.
Wow. And look, I mean, if our listeners will have to check out the article for themselves to sort of to read what happens next, because it is incredible how you came to Australia and following your dad's example, you discovered how Jesus became very real to you, and your life undertook yet another transformation, which is really amazing. But I mean, a transformation to the point that you're actually pastoring now, which is just pretty unbelievable, considering how much you hated school and how much you hated religion.
That's right.
And religion. And there you are. One thing I'd like to ask you about, and I was actually listening to an interview with someone that we both studied with at college, Ben Tavao, who's he's pastoring in WA, and he's pastoring a church there, and they're doing some incredible work, reaching out to the community, connecting with people in a real way, making a real positive difference to their community, which I think is incredible. And I guess I just wonder, you talking about your experience with the loyalty in gangs, and then your experience of discovering how precious life is, and then your experience of discovering how precious Jesus is to you. How does that affect?
Absolutely.
Yeah, how does that affect the way you minister and the way you encourage your congregation to pursue God, to look after one another, to consider the needs of their community?
Sure. I've come into the ministry with this experience that I've had out in the streets, and this understanding of a need for someone to be there for people, that for someone to be there in someone's most difficult times, trials. So for me, having that sort of understanding, while I'm ministering in the church, I'm trying to get people to see that there's a need out there for the young ones. There's a need out there for people who are involved in drugs. There are people out there who are homeless that need to hear this message. And for me, it was like, here's a message that transformed my father. It transformed me. It transformed my brother. I'm 120% certain that the message will do its work of transforming lives. And I've used it now, the message as a part of my life to go out into the community, to people who I meet at the bus stop, people I meet at the supermarket. My house is no longer my house. I've opened it up to people. I'm mentoring young kids who are at the age of 15, 16, mentoring them through training, talking about life and praying with them, talking to them about the importance of building relationships, having a brotherhood, being there for each other, creating community, in a world that's so individualistic. And so for me, I have this passion because I know what it's done for me. I know how much it's changed my life, and I know how much my family needed Christ in order to bring about a change in our families and to strengthen those relationships that was there. And listen, that doesn't mean that our problems all of a sudden disappeared. They didn't. Yeah. We had problems when we were non-Christians, and we got problems now as Christians. The difference is we've got hope now. We're not on our own. We're not by ourselves. We're not in that state of hopelessness where we think, who's going to help us out in the situation? Who's walking with me? There are times when I wasn't alone, but I felt lonely. Yeah. Now, having this faith with God, journeying with God, not been walking with God since 2007, and I've never ever come to that place where felt alone and completely all by myself, isolated. I know that every time I feel that, I'm in a place where, I'm going through a dark time in my life, mentally and emotionally, yeah. I just get down on my knees and I do exactly what my mother did. I'm praying, but I'm praying and resting with faith, knowing that God will deliver, God will come through. And I'm doing that for those who are going through difficult times here in the community that I'm ministering in as well. I'm ministering to uni students, to high school students, those who are in the church, those who have left the church, those who are from different religions, Muslims and Hindus. We've opened up our house, and because I've got that sort of experience of people where, who are in the real world, for me, I feel I can speak their language. I can meet them halfway and talk to them about the love of Christ and how He has transformed my life and that sort of thing. So.
Man, incredible. Look, I just thank you so much, Rome, for being open about your story. I mean, I know it's probably, a painful story for you to recall and retell in many ways, but I know, so many people have been helped by you being able to be open and vulnerable about it. So, and an incredible story and an incredible transformation in you and your family. Thanks so much for being here today and on Signs of the Times Radio.
No worries. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story, and hopefully that it could transform somebody else's life.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.